My name is Scarlett Johansson, and the day I had to prove a car crash wasn't my fault, my dad promised he'd show up in court as my witness, then vanished. A month later, he bragged about paying my sister $1 million to start over. If you've lived through something like this, share your experience in the comments. The office smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner, which is basically the scent of every deadline I'd ever met. My screen had 3 windows open: an escrow form, a calendar invite, and an email subject line that wouldn't stop glaring at me. Reminder, court appearance, tomorrow, 9 a.m. My phone buzzed again, a text from the insurance attorney handling my claim. Scarlett, confirm you'll be at Fulton County Courthouse, courtroom 5C, 9 o'clock sharp. Another buzz, this time an automated email from the court system, with my case number and the judge's name buried halfway down. A voicemail followed, the clerk's voice fast and practiced, like she'd said it 1,000 times already. Then the sentence that kept looping in my head anyway. The day I went to court over a car wreck that wasn't my fault, my dad promised he'd show up as my witness, but he never did. At the time, I still believed promises counted as evidence. A coworker leaned over my cubicle wall and asked if I was coming to lunch. My mouth said, maybe, while my hands shoved papers into my bag like I was packing for a storm. The firm didn't like employees with personal drama. They preferred your problems filed neatly in a drawer. The envelope with my case materials was in my trunk. I jogged to the parking deck, popped it open, and dug through it right there between 2 SUVs. Repair invoices, the police report, photos of my bumper, my bruised shoulder, the intersection. But the printed request for the intersection footage, the page I remembered stapling on top, was gone. I stood there, staring into the envelope like it might apologize. My phone rang. Dad. Rick, I answered, because calling him Dad always felt like asking for something. Breathe, he said, voice firm, like he was already testifying. Breathe and listen. I'll be there at 9 a.m. at Fulton County Courthouse. You just stand up straight and answer clean. Don't get cute. Okay, I said. He hung up before I could ask where he'd been when I needed him last week, when I'd asked him to print that request at his house because his printer actually works. Traffic was ugly. Still, I swung by the intersection on Edgewood, the place where the other driver had turned across my lane and then acted shocked that physics applied to him. I parked, took out my phone to snap a few pictures, and found a small sign zip-tied to the pole. Traffic monitor temporarily out of service. I stared at it the way people stare at gas prices. Blank, resigned, already doing math. Back in the car, another email came in from the Department of Transportation. Footage not available due to maintenance. The timestamp matched the morning I'd submitted my request, almost like someone had been waiting with their finger on send. At home, I opened my laptop and clicked the dashcam file I'd saved the night of the crash. The file name was there. The size read 0 bytes. No error message, no explanation, just emptiness dressed up as data. Of course, I told myself, if there's a universe, the universe files paperwork. By 8:56 the next morning, I was at the courthouse security line, shoes in a bin, belt in my hands. I texted Rick, "Here." The message showed, "Delivered," not read. A deputy waved me forward, and the clerk called my name like she'd been waiting for me all morning. Bench seats in courtroom 5C creaked every time someone shifted, like the room was keeping track. I slid into my spot at the plaintiff's table and set my folder down with both hands. Across the aisle, the other driver's attorney checked his watch and offered a polite smile, the kind you give when you're certain you won't be the one explaining anything later. The witness chair behind me was empty. That should have been temporary. That was the whole plan. The judge glanced at the docket, then up at me. "Ms. Johansson, where is your witness?" "My father is on his way," I said, and kept my face steady like I was reading a status update. The judge looked at the clerk. 10 minutes, she said, like she was granting a favor she didn't enjoy granting. 10 minutes is a long time when you're waiting for a person. 10 minutes is nothing when you're waiting for a system. I stepped into the hallway and called Rick. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. A third time. Voicemail. Same recorded greeting, same little beep that made my stomach tighten without me showing it. I texted, "Where are you?" No answer. Not even the courtesy of a typo. When I walked back in, the other attorney rose like he'd been practicing the motion in his sleep. "Your Honor, given the witness is not present, we'd ask to proceed." The judge's eyes cut to me again. "Ms. Johansson?" "My father is coming," I repeated, because the truth was I had nothing else to offer. No traffic feed, no street monitor clip, no neat little file that could talk for me. Just a police report and my own mouth. "Proceed," the judge said, and the gavel didn't have to hit for it to feel like something shut. The other attorney started building a story out loud, brick by brick, like he'd brought the blueprint with him. Ms. Johansson was driving too fast for conditions. She failed to maintain her lane. She changed lanes without checking. He said it with the calm of someone ordering lunch. When it was my turn, I stood, smoothed my skirt once, and held up the police report. The responding officer wrote that the other driver turned left across oncoming traffic, I said. He cited the other driver. The attorney tilted his head. "And you have video of the intersection that morning?" I didn't look at my notes. Notes don't create footage. "No," I said. "The Department of Transportation said it was unavailable due to maintenance." He nodded like that was unfortunate but convenient. "So we're left with your word." He didn't say liar. He didn't need to. The room heard it anyway. Questions came fast after that. How long had I been driving? What speed? What lane? Had I been distracted? Had I looked down? Had I been running late? Each one was a small push toward a version of me that sounded careless. My phone buzzed in my pocket while the attorney spoke. I didn't check it until the judge called for a brief pause. It was my boss. "Do not let this spill into the firm," the text read. "We can't have a paralegal tied up in a mess." Another buzz, this time from Rick. "You okay?" No apology, no location, just the tone people use when they see rain and want credit for noticing weather. Then a notification from the family group thread. Ava had posted a story. "Some people need to take responsibility." No name, no context, just a clean little line, like a motivational poster that wanted blood. I walked out again and found a bench near the water fountain. That's where Marisol Vega appeared, like she'd been there the whole time, and I just hadn't had the bandwidth to notice. She held out a travel pack of tissues without making a face about it. "Take one," she said. "I'm not crying," I said. "Good," Marisol replied. "Then use it for the ink. Your life is bleeding." That got a single blink out of me. I took a tissue anyway and wiped my hands, not my eyes. Marisol glanced at my stack of papers. Her gaze skipped me entirely and landed on the printed email from transportation. "Show me the request," she said. I handed it over. She tapped through her phone with quick thumbs, checking something I didn't have access to at work. Her expression stayed neutral, but her jaw set. "Maintenance scheduled," she read. "Order created 1 day before you filed. That's not how routine work usually gets logged." "So it's weird," I said. "It's targeted," she replied. Then, softer, glancing back at my documents, "Congratulations. These are the only things in your life showing up on time." I nodded as if she'd delivered a normal report. The clerk stepped into the hallway and called my name. When I approached, she handed me a stamped sheet. "Supplemental evidence," she said. "You have 48 hours. I took it, already dialing Rick again as the judge's voice carried from the doorway. "Ms. Johansson, back to your table." Marisol didn't follow me into the courtroom. She guided me together the clerk's office instead, like she'd decided the fight wasn't happening on a wooden bench. 48 hours, she said, tapping the stamped sheet. "That's not time. That's a prank." We stood behind a man arguing about a parking ticket. When it was our turn, Marisol slid my case number forward and asked for anything tied to intersection footage requests, maintenance orders, and contractor scheduling. The clerk's expression didn't change, but her hands moved faster, which told me she'd heard those words before and didn't like where they usually led. "Some of this has to go through records," the clerk said. "Great," Marisol replied. "We love paperwork. It's our love language." A request form landed in front of me. I filled it out, signed twice, and watched the clerk stamp it like she was sealing an envelope nobody wanted to open. Marisol took a photo of the stamped date and time, then another of the clerk's nameplate. "Why are we doing that?" I asked. "Because if it turns into he said, she said, we're bringing the when and the who," she said. "Feelings don't get tracked. Timestamps do." By the time we reached the hallway again, my phone was buzzing in my pocket like it had opinions. I checked it and saw nothing from Rick. No missed call, no apology. Just empty space where a father was supposed to be. Marisol stopped near a vending machine and held her hand out. "Give me your phone account login," she said. "I don't have—" "You do," she cut in. "You told me you're still listed on the family plan. That means the carrier can show call history, not content, history." The request took 15 minutes at a small carrier store across the street, the kind with faded posters and a bored employee who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He printed out the call log because Marisol asked with the calm confidence of someone who expects compliance. One line jumped off the page. 8:10 a.m. to 8:28 a.m. A single call. 28 minutes. The number wasn't saved under a name. Marisol circled it with a pen she pulled from her bag. "That's your 10 minutes," she said, "plus the time he never gave you back." We stepped outside and she ran the number through a search database she had access to through her work. Her thumb paused, then kept going. "It's tied to a claims office," she said. "Third-party administrator. They coordinate with defense counsel." My throat didn't tighten. My face didn't burn. Everything just went flat, the way a monitor does when power cuts. "So he didn't miss my text," I said. "He was busy," Marisol replied, "just not with you." When Rick finally called, it was late afternoon, like he'd penciled me in between errands. "Scarlett," he said, steady as ever, "why are you making this bigger than it has to be?" "You weren't there," I said. "I had things to handle," he replied. "Listen, you can sign the settlement, you take partial responsibility, they pay something, and it ends." "It ends for who?" I asked. A pause, then the softer voice he used when he wanted to sound generous. "I'm covering some things at the house," he said. "You know that. Don't force me into choices I don't want to make." Marisol watched my face while I listened. She didn't mouth advice. She didn't grab the phone. She just waited, like she'd seen this pattern before, and knew it only broke when the person living it moved. I drove to Buckhead after work hours, steering with one hand and gripping the printed call log with the other, like it could keep me from floating off the road. Rick's place was spotless, the kind of clean that made you feel like you should apologize for breathing. He was in the kitchen, checking something on his tablet. He didn't look surprised to see me. "Long day?" he asked, like I'd stopped by to return a dish. I held up the paper. "Who did you talk to for 28 minutes this morning?" I asked. Rick glanced at it once. "I called to ask about procedure," he said. "You always assume the worst." "Procedure for my case," I said, "while you let me stand alone." Ava walked in from the hallway wearing a robe like she owned the air. "What's this?" she asked. Rick's answer was smooth. "Your sister is spiraling," he said. Ava looked at me, then at the paper, then back at my face. "You always need to be right," she said. "It's exhausting." My eyes drifted to the built-in wine cabinet behind Rick, bottles lined up like trophies. The words came out level, almost polite. "I'll make a note," I said. "Family always has a budget. It's just not for me." Rick's mouth tightened for half a second before he reached for the drawer where he kept his stationery. "If you're going to act like this," he said, "we're done talking." "Good," I replied. The next morning, I filed the paperwork to formally compel his testimony. The clerk stamped it. A deputy signed the receipt. The process was clean, simple, and completely uninterested in my last name. That afternoon, my office phone rang. "Scarlett," HR said, "someone reported you for harassing a witness in your personal lawsuit." As she spoke, a calendar invite slid onto my screen. "Disciplinary meeting. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Donna and HR met me in a glass-walled office near the copy machines. A folder sat between us, closed, like I was a client they hadn't agreed to represent. "Close the door," Donna said. No chair was offered. I stayed standing. "You've been reported for attempting to intimidate a witness in your personal lawsuit," HR said. "It was my father," I replied. "That makes it worse," Donna said. "It makes it messy." My phone flashed a courthouse reminder, 9 a.m., courtroom 5C. Their calendar read 10 o'clock. "Go handle your court thing," Donna said. "But this can't touch our work." I walked out with nothing in writing, just the promise that we'd revisit it later. Courtroom 5C was fuller than last time. Defense counsel had a fresh binder and the relaxed look of someone whose witness had shown up. Mine hadn't. The chair behind me stayed empty. The judge glanced at it. "Still no witness?" she asked. "My father was subpoenaed," I said, sliding the stamped paper forward. She skimmed it and handed it back. "A subpoena isn't a person." Defense counsel rose. "Your Honor, we ask to proceed. The plaintiff has had ample opportunity." Under the table, I dialed Rick. Voicemail. Another try. Voicemail again. There wasn't time to keep begging. "Proceed," the judge said. Without the traffic recording, without my dash device file, without Rick confirming what he saw from the passenger seat, the defense's story filled every gap. They painted me as rushed, distracted, careless. I pointed to the police report, repeated that the officer cited the other driver, and watched it land like paper in a room built for certainty. The ruling came out flat and fast. "Liability apportioned," the judge said. "Damages awarded accordingly." Numbers followed: bills, costs, a figure I would owe, and a figure I would not receive. The clerk stamped the order and slid it into the file. At the clerk's window, I signed for my copy and got directed to a cashier counter, like I was buying a ticket. The defense lawyer shook my hand anyway. "Nothing personal," he said. "Sure," I replied. Outside, my phone pinged with the insurance adjuster's email, asking when I'd start payments. A deputy taped the stamped order to my packet, and the paper edges scraped my thumb as I walked out. In the hallway, Marisol met me by the elevator. "You lost," she said. "Yes," I answered. She nodded once, then looked past me toward the courtroom doors, like she was measuring what it took to get someone to disappear. Back at the firm, Donna waited with HR. The conversation lasted 2 minutes. "Administrative leave," HR said, pushing a letter across the desk. "Pending review." Donna held out her hand. "Badge." The access card dropped into her palm. She set it on top of the letter. "This isn't personal," Donna said. "It never is," I replied. My phone lit up with Rick's message. "You didn't have to do all that." Ava followed with her own. "Dad tried. Stop blaming him." Then my mother, who hadn't called once through the case, sent, "Your father is heartbroken." An email arrived from the Department of Transportation before lunch. Same sentence as before, traffic recording unavailable. Then a line that hadn't been there the first time. Maintenance performed by contractor, Peachtree Signal Services. The name matched what Marisol had flagged from a set of invoices tied to one of Rick's business contacts. It didn't explain everything, but it confirmed the shape of it. Marisol met me at a diner near the courthouse and slid a printed list across the table. Clerk numbers, records addresses, insurance contacts, contractor registration details. "Now you know what you're playing with," she said. I folded the list and put it in my bag. A cardboard box waited at my desk. Someone had packed my mug and my stapler like they were closing out an office. I carried it to the parking deck, balancing it against my hip. Halfway to my car, my phone rang. Rick's name filled the screen. I answered. "Come to dinner tonight," he said, calm as ever. "I need to talk." The box rode in my passenger seat like a sulky roommate. Rick's address was already in my phone because, of course it was. The gate opened after a code, and I parked in a driveway that never had oil stains. Rick answered before I knocked twice. "Come in," he said. "Dinner's ready." Food covered the table. Roast chicken, green beans, rolls, a bowl of salad nobody would touch. It looked like a magazine spread about simple weeknights, except nobody at this table had a simple week. Ava was already seated, hair pinned up, robe replaced with something soft and expensive. She glanced at the box I'd left by the entryway, then looked away like it was a bag of trash on the curb. Rick poured water and sat, shoulders squared, the posture of a man who believed he could arrange outcomes by staying calm. "Let's be practical," he said. "You can sign the payment plan, you admit partial responsibility, you pay it down, and people stop talking." Ava buttered a roll without looking up. "That's what adults do," she added. "They don't drag everyone through their mess." Forks moved, plates clinked. Nobody said the words courthouse or judgment. I chewed once, swallowed, and set my fork down. "Where were you that morning?" I asked. Rick didn't blink, like he'd predicted the question and already filed it under unhelpful. "Scarlett, you're fixating," he said. "I made calls. I handled what needed handling. That's what you're not seeing." "What I saw was an empty chair," I said. Rick's mouth tightened, then loosened again. His gaze shifted to Ava, like she was the reason we were all here. "Speaking of handling things," he said, warming his tone, "your sister finally gets to start over after the divorce." Ava's face softened into something almost grateful. "I needed a clean slate," she said. "Some people actually support family." My glass stayed on the table. My hand stayed flat beside my plate. The calm was real, but it wasn't peace. It was containment. Rick reached to the sideboard and came back with a manila envelope. He slid it across the table like it was dessert. "I took care of it," he said. $1 million, so she can start again." Ava didn't flinch at the number. She didn't even pretend to. She just nodded, the way people nod when a waiter refills their drink. Something in my chest tried to do math and gave up. Rent, credit cards, the judgment amount, the firm's health insurance that would end the moment Donna's review became permanent. My phone bill, still on the family plan because it had been easier to stay on it than explain why I wanted off. Rick opened the envelope and fanned out papers. A wire confirmation sat on top, neat and official. The recipient line didn't say Ava Johansson. It said Ava Restart Holdings, LLC. I tapped the page once with my fingertip. "This isn't to her," I said. "It's to a company." "It's a structure," Rick replied. "Don't get hung up on labels." Ava finally looked at me. "Why are you like this?" she asked. "It's help. Help. Not for me. Not when I needed a person in a chair. Not when my job was about to slip away. Not when I'd asked for one printed page and it vanished. The pattern wasn't new. What was new was seeing it in ink. A thought landed, plain and ugly. Being low maintenance wasn't a virtue here. It was a business model. "Stay composed. Check your email," her text read. "Sent something. Don't burn it. Save it with a timestamp." The email had 2 lines and an attachment. Contractor name, Peachtree Signal Services. Invoice code, PSS-1472B. Days became a schedule I could measure. Mornings went to temp work and payment plans. Evenings went to prep books, practice tests, and a classroom full of adults who looked tired in the same way I felt. Marisol stayed in the background, not cheering, not consoling, just sending short messages with addresses and office names. "Records Division, DOT," she texted one Tuesday. "Ask for the maintenance work order number." At the Department of Transportation office, a clerk slid a clipboard toward me and asked for a case number. A copy request form followed. My pen moved, signature neat, date legible. The clerk stamped it and said the line every office says when they don't want to argue. Processing time is processing time. 2 days later, the packet arrived with thick black bars over the parts that mattered. "Retention policy," the cover letter said. "Certain details not available." The next stop was the contractor listed on the DOT letter. The receptionist smiled like she'd practiced it for angry customers. "I'm looking for invoice code PSS-1472B, I said. She disappeared, returned with a man in a polo shirt, and he met me with a look that said he already had a script. "We don't comment on municipal work," he said. "Confidentiality agreements." "It's a maintenance order," I replied. "It's not a medical record." He shrugged. "I don't remember," he said. "Even if I did, I wouldn't discuss it." Marisol got more traction than I did, but not without consequences. She pulled a contractor registry record that showed the urgent service request wasn't created through the usual queue. It was flagged as priority. Someone with a recognized name had pushed it. She didn't say Rick out loud in public. Instead, she slid a printout across a diner table and tapped a line item with her nail. Priority request, she said. Requested by a liaison. That's not random. A second page had an email header. Nobody, just routing. The sender domain belonged to a claims administration office, the same category tied to the number Rick spoke with that morning for 28 minutes. So he wasn't stuck in traffic, I said. Marisol didn't nod. She didn't have to. He was clearing the lane, she replied. We tried the insurance side next. A formal request went in. A form letter came back. Not in our possession. Not subject to release. Contact counsel. A witness who'd been at the intersection, someone Marisol found through a neighborhood forum, agreed to meet, then backed out an hour before we sat down. Sorry, he texted. Got a call. Don't want trouble. Marisol's phone rang while we stood outside my car. It's my supervisor, she said, and answered with the same tone she used for everybody else. After a pause, her shoulders stiffened. Understood, she said. Won't happen again. She ended the call and looked at me like she'd been handed a leash. They told me to stop getting involved in your personal issues, she said. They used the word liability. A complaint filed with DOT went nowhere. The response came back with a checklist of missing items that could only be provided by the original source that wouldn't provide them. Insufficient evidence, it said. Request denied. The shape of it started showing up in places I couldn't ignore. Rick needed me to lose, or at least to accept partial responsibility, because a clean win for me would pull threads he didn't want pulled. A contractor, a priority request, a claims office phone call. Those weren't a father's accident. They were a chain. And the money to Ava wasn't just generosity. It had structure, paperwork, and cover. That lesson arrived in a crisp envelope with Rick's return address. The letterhead belonged to an estate planning attorney. Ms. Johansson, it began, I represent your family in matters of privacy and fiduciary planning. The next paragraph warned me that certain records I was attempting to obtain were protected by privilege and that continuing could create legal exposure. The final line was the part meant to land like a hand on the back of my neck. We advise you to discontinue these efforts to avoid unnecessary complications. Marisol read it at a table in the law library and slid it back without changing her expression. He hired a lawyer to tell you to stop, she said. That's not what innocent people do. A notification popped on my laptop before I could respond. Congratulations, the email subject line read. Admission decision. My phone buzzed immediately after. Ava this time. Stop, her message said. You're tearing this family apart. My hand rested on a thick book of procedure while the screen lit up again with an incoming call. Rick. I let it ring and went back to practice questions. 3 years of nights like that turned into a bar card and a license that didn't care about my last name. On a Monday in Fulton County Courthouse, my attorney badge clipped to my blazer, the deputy at security scanned it and waved me through. Courtroom 5C sat at the end of the hallway, exactly as unimpressed as ever. A clerk nodded at my badge. No one looked for my father. Rick intercepted me by the elevators. Scarlett, he said. Good, you're here. What is this? I asked. Ava's being investigated, he said. Some financial fraud thing. They're turning it into a circus. Help me protect the family name, he added. Just handle it. Rick glanced around the hallway, then smiled at a passing bailiff like they were old friends. This stays in the family, he said. Families don't have attorney-client privilege, I replied. He frowned. Don't be cute. Then don't ask me to clean up with a mop and no bucket today, Rick. Send me documents, I said. Everything in writing. If you want advice, you sign an engagement letter. Rick blinked. Since when do you make me sign anything? Since promises stopped being useful, I said. He agreed to meet at my office that afternoon. Ava came with him, polished and irritated. Rick dropped a thick folder on my desk. Divorce. Start over money. All clean, he said. The first page was a wire confirmation. The recipient wasn't Ava. It was Ava Restart Holdings, LLC. Under it sat consulting fees, with no contracts, only invoices, with vague descriptions and large round numbers. "Where are the agreements for these fees?" I asked. "You're overthinking," Rick said. "It's standard." Ava sighed. "Can we not do the lecture?" "Dad helped me. That's it." I slid the engagement letter across the desk. "Sign." Rick held the pen. "Are you billing your own father now?" "I'm documenting my own father," I replied. He signed. Marisol texted me an hour later. "Meet me, diner by the courthouse." She set an envelope on the table. "These are the victims," she said. "Retirees, a church fund. They wired money for investments. It went through an intermediary account, then into Ava's LLC." She pointed to the account number. It repeated across pages, and one transfer jumped out. $1 million, timed right after the day Rick skipped my hearing. "You told me he bragged about it," Marisol said. "At dinner," I answered. "It wasn't a gift," she said. "It was a route." She flipped to another sheet, a contractor payment ledger tied to a priority service request at the intersection where my evidence disappeared. Same intermediary account, different label. 2 days later, a civil hearing for the victims was set. Rick arrived with Ava and walked toward the defense table like it belonged to him. I was already seated, on the plaintiff's side. They stopped. Rick's eyes went to my name on the placard. "You're with them?" he said. "I'm where the paperwork leads," I replied. Ava snapped. "You're doing this to punish me." I slid the first exhibit across the table. "Here's the $1 million transfer. Here's the LLC structure. Here's the date." Rick pushed it back with 2 fingers. That was support after her divorce, not illegal. I placed the second packet beside it. Bank tracing shows the money moved through an intermediary account and cycled into the same investments these people were sold. Ava shook her head. "This is fake. You're twisting it." I set down the final page. That intermediary paid the contractor who filed the priority request that wiped out the intersection recording on my court day, I said. And Rick spent 28 minutes on the phone that morning with the claims administrator tied to this chain. Rick's face strained. "What are you trying to do?" he asked. I kept my voice even. "So nobody has to guess. I brought numbers." The door behind them opened. A court officer stepped in with 2 investigators. "Miss Ava Johansson?" one asked. "Yes," Ava said. "Stand up," he said, extending the order, and Rick reached for her sleeve as the officer told him to step back. Ava stood when the investigator repeated her name, but she tried to stand like she was doing them a favor. Rick reached for her sleeve and got a flat palm from the court officer. The order was read out loud, not as a threat, just as a schedule. Accounts frozen, travel restricted, surrender of devices. Ava's jaw worked like she was chewing something hard. She looked at me once, expecting me. Peterwork moved while he tried to bargain, and the investigators didn't negotiate. They served Rick a notice to preserve records, the kind that assumes you'll be tempted to get creative. His hands shook when he signed. Mine didn't, because shaking hands don't change filings. Marisol waited by the fountain and handed me a folder. Months later, the fraud case landed back on the same docket. Ava sat at the defense table in a plain blouse, no designer wrap, no stories. The prosecutor read the charges like a grocery list: wire fraud, identity theft, theft by deception. When the judge asked if she understood, Ava answered too softly, then tried again, louder. Evidence came in through bank statements and emails, not drama. Victims spoke about missing retirement checks and a church roof that never got fixed. Rick stayed in the back row, upright, as if posture could buy mercy. His eyes never left my table. On sentencing day, the clerk read the conditions and the time, each number landing with a dull thud. Ava's attorney argued for leniency. Ava cried at the part about her fresh start, like the phrase was a legal defense. The judge listened, then looked at the victims, then at Ava. "Guilty on all counts," she said, and the room exhaled. A deputy stepped forward with cuffs. Ava's wrists went out automatically, like she'd finally learned a procedure. Rick didn't move. He stared at me as if I'd changed the law personally. His mouth opened once, then closed like a door. Afterward, in the hallway, Rick caught up to me before I could reach the stairs. His voice had lost the command tone. It sounded thin, almost polite. You really did this?" he asked. I adjusted my files against my hip. "This time, I'm not late," I said. He flinched like I'd slapped him with paperwork. Rick pulled a pen from his pocket, the silver one he'd given me years ago, for emergencies. I placed it in his hand. "Returning your emergency item," I said. "I won't be needing it." He looked at it, waiting for me to take it back. Work came next because it always does. I signed the last filing, emailed copies to the plaintiff's counsel, and handed originals to the clerk without looking at Rick again. On my way out, Ava's number flashed on my screen. I blocked it. Rick's followed. The family group thread stayed open just long enough for me to leave it. At my office, I updated my emergency contact form and deleted Rick's name, then typed Marisol's. She didn't comment when I told her. She just slid me a sticky note with her middle initial, her version of a hug. It worked fine. At courthouse security, a deputy offered a visitor sticker to a man who'd forgotten his ID. I watched him peel it off and stick it to his shirt and remembered mine from years ago. My current badge stayed clipped to my lapel. The old visitor pass I'd kept in my wallet went into the trash beside the metal detector. The bin swallowed it without ceremony. I pushed through the glass doors into Atlanta heat, phone in one hand, case file in the other, and kept walking as the courthouse behind me stayed exactly where it belonged. Nobody called my name.